In most horror games, you are a mostly innocent person trying to survive. Whether the threat is a monster, something paranormal, or a crazed killer, you are usually doing your best to survive the active threat. Well, today I'd like to introduce you to a horror game where you are the killer. Today I am diving into the Happyhills Homicide, a game made by Copperbolt, who is probably best known for the game Whiskers, formerly known as Mr. Whiskers. The Happyhills Homicide had multiple demos released, but to my knowledge the full game was released in late 2022, and this game is a wild ride. This is a story about revenge, obsession, and tragedy, all from the perspective of the killer themselves. The Happyhills Homicide is a puzzle game where you play as a traditional slasher type of character. You need to navigate environments and utilize items to kill people in creative fashions, and avoid getting caught. Every level is a different place and a different victim. With each level the difficulty is increased, starting off with very simple kills that either require very little thought or just a little bit of patience, but as you progress through the game, you have to take multiple factors into account. There will be more and more steps to commit your murder, and much more to navigate to avoid getting caught. I genuinely love this game's puzzles. It is one of my favorite puzzle-based horror games of all time. Some of the solutions to these puzzles are so over the top and goofy, and some are legitimately really clever. I love this one stage where you're in a locker room and you need to dress up as a football player to blend in and sneak by a member of that team. Another favorite of mine is this level that takes place entirely on a farm with tall wheat, traps, and equipment. You need to use a rake to trigger the traps to move freely, you need to use the wheat to hide from the farmer, and then you get to turn the farmer into a goddamn hay bale. The last level I'll use as an example of gameplay is one of the later stages that takes place in a toy store. You're being tracked down by an entire SWAT team, and you need to very carefully hide in and out of rooms to avoid being caught. This is an extremely long and suspenseful stage where you need to be so unbelievably patient to avoid and kill off those looking for you. That is until near the end, where you grab one of them and use them as a human shield while others shoot at you. It is such a dramatic moment that is so over the top, and I love it. The puzzles of the Happyhills Homicide are truly fun to play, which is something indie horror games get wrong pretty often. Some other games get them right, but a lot of the time they just exist to pad out the runtime of the game. Happyhills Homicide is solely based on its puzzles, and they are properly fleshed out and really interesting. Not to mention, some of these kills are fucking awesome. One of the most complicated stages takes place in a bar, where you have to use every item at your disposal to take out different people, and it is a serious bloodbath. You break into a hospital and defibrillate someone to death, you run someone over with a lawnmower, you use a harpoon to kill a fisherman from underneath his boat. This game understands why slashers are so exciting. But moving on from the gameplay, because I think there is something more interesting to talk about, some of you paying close attention may have noticed that every level is referred to as a tape. Well, let me tell you the tale of the Happyhills Homicide. The structure of this game is really fascinating and creative. Basically, in most levels, you do play as the slasher that the game is all about. However, the game switches it up every now and then, and makes you play as a detective investigating some of the murders. So this game makes you play as an unnamed mysterious lunatic that kills people, and then it makes you play as an innocent authority investigating the situation. So you, the player, are killing people, not even knowing who you are or the story of who you are, but you are told more about yourself through the lens of another character that is trying to get a hold of you that you occasionally get the point of view of. I find that really interesting. And it's not like in one tape you get a location, and then in another you get a name, and then finally in another you get a motive. It's not structured like that. This game is a legitimate murder mystery where you are the murderer. The first few investigations from the detectives is literally nothing but suspicion. Here's the first investigation. We learn the name of our detective and victim, but everything about the killer is a question. Sadistic power display is written as a question. The motive is a question. The political message isn't known for sure. We get very little information besides it being angry and personal is suspected, which is interesting because we do also learn that the victim has a criminal record because of some pretty abhorrent charges. In the second investigation, we learn a little bit more. We can't exactly come to a real conclusion, but we have more information. We read that ripped clothing left at the crime scene matches that of a janitor's uniform. We also read that the kills seem to be acts of revenge, and there is suspicion that the killer believes the victims deserve their demise because, just like the victim in the last investigation, this victim does have a criminal record. Again, I just love this form of storytelling. The idea of following a murder mystery like you would traditionally, but being responsible for the murders at hand is so intriguing. In between that last investigation and the next, we actually get a totally unique level and scenario where the killer and the detective are on the same bus. You play as the killer and get off the bus along with this woman and follow her in the dark, avoiding the light that would reveal you. But when you're about to reach her to get your kill, you're stopped by the detective. After a short confrontation, the killer yells, "I am death," before the lights go out and he vanishes. This isn't very revealing or anything, but I really appreciate the way this follows the cliches that you would expect in a slasher film. There's always that one time where the killer could obviously get caught, and should, but something borderline supernatural happens so he can get away. Directly following this scene, we have the next investigation. In this one, the victim does not have a criminal record, throwing the theory of vigilantism presumably out the window. Again, most of what we have is just questions. What is the connection between these murders? What could the killer want revenge for? The authorities believe he will go after the girl from the prior scene, Madison, so they will be making an active effort to protect her. This does not work, however, because in the very next level, you once again play as the killer. After taking the life of the police officer that was meant to protect Madison, and despite the efforts Madison took to protect her own life, the killer does manage to kill her. After Madison's death, the killer says, "I am sorry, Madison. You were the only kind one. Why did you have to run?" This brings up so many questions that we obviously can't answer at this point. What does he mean when he asks why she had to run? Run from what? He can't be referring to when she ran from him earlier, because she didn't even really run, and besides that, what would have his intention been if not to kill her? This is such a vague piece of dialogue, and I love that. Just these few sentences alone show that the killer has a story that we don't know about, he is in fact targeting his victims, and that he will kill those that haven't directly wronged him. If Madison was the only kind one, why was she killed? And again, what did she run from? In the next and technically final investigation, the detective is investigating Madison's murder. He finds a class photo from Madison's high school, just to find out that most of the murder victims are present in the photograph. The people that have been dying, seemingly at random, actually went to the same school. We then find out the school burned down a year ago for unknown reasons. Every victim went to the school or worked there, and everyone made it out alive except for one person. Everybody in this high school made it out of the fire except for John Wade, whose body was never found at the location. And then we get a level that is not labeled as a tape, but is merely a flashback. We play as a janitor at West Pine High. We walk through the halls where all of these strikingly familiar people clearly do not respect us. Teachers disrespect us, girls gossip and insult us, fellow janitors are cruel to us. Everyone is horrible except for one person, Madison, who has a kind smile and speaks to us like a normal human being. We walk into what is presumably meant to be a janitorial or storage closet, but also seems to be where the protagonist is living. We can see that this person has developed an unhealthy and creepy obsession with Madison, likely because no one else in his life has ever made him feel like a person. Suddenly, smoke starts to form outside the door, and flames are seen beneath it. We see these two generic jocks outside the room pulling a prank on the janitor. They meant for it to be an innocent joke, but obviously this was going to get out of hand, and they didn't really care. They contemplate helping the janitor get out, but choose to leave him trapped inside. The place continues to burn with him inside, and the stage ends. This is a pretty simple and cliche origin, but the build-up to this point makes it amazing. The fact that you recognize the people in the building if you remember your previous killings, the way every investigation provides many questions with a few answers, and the fact that John Wade gets trapped and dies in this room along with the mask that we have become so familiar with throughout this game is so cool. And of course this explains what he meant when he said, "Why did you have to run?" Because, technically speaking, Madison could have let him out of the room. However, this is not the end. There is a final stage after the flashback. We start off playing as the killer. We're in the room we just watched him die in, with the picture of Madison still up and the name of the level on the television. The killer takes some traps from within the room and lays them out through the hall and returns back to grab his trusty sledgehammer. The game then proclaims 5 minutes earlier on screen. We're now playing as the detective, arriving at the school with his gun drawn. We evade the traps laid out in the dark hallway and make it to the room of the killer, where you discover that he has been videotaping his killings. That is why every level is labeled as a tape. John Wade is keeping evidence of his murders as a keepsake. The detective goes through a vent that the killer evidently also traveled through. Now, with both the killer and you as the detective on the premises, it is your job to shoot the killer multiple times and avoid being stabbed in the process. After getting your final shot and seeing the killer suffer and bleed, your job is done. You go outside to meet with the proper authorities and discuss the matter. But, despite the seeming impossibility, the body of John Wade cannot be found. It has gone missing. And that is how the game ends. But, what is a slasher without a grand final return? This game is so fire. I am by no means a horror movie expert. My expertise is very much within the realm of gaming, especially in the indie scene. However, my favorite horror movies are absolutely slashers. And the way this game crafted the experience of a slasher and the storytelling of a slasher movie so perfectly is one of the coolest concepts I have ever seen for any indie title. Because the great majority of this game, although it may not have seemed like it with the way I described it, unfortunately, but the great majority of this game takes place from the perspective of the killer. Almost all of it does, and most of it just consists of the killings, where every now and then you get a little more information. And that makes the ending hit so much harder than in a regular slasher, because you were the slasher. This whole time, you were just killing people, and killing people, and killing people, not even knowing who you were or why. And that is so interesting to me. In most slashers, you don't really find out who the killer is till the end. That's basically the trope, and that is almost inherently needed for a slasher. Not always, but a lot of the time. However, the fact that you are in the perspective of the killer, but also figuring out the clues the same way you would normally, I've never seen anything like that. And this game is free, by the way. I know I spoiled the twists and turns, but this game is genuinely really fun, so if you want to play it, there will be a link to the Game Jolt page in the description. And this developer still makes games. They released a brand new one around Halloween, which I probably will play on stream. Pretty much everything about this game is perfect. I think there are like 2 puzzles that are a little overly complicated, but with roughly 20 levels, I am amazed at just how fun the puzzles are. I love playing this game despite already knowing the story, which is always an impressive quality for a game like this to have. The complicated and crazy kills are so cool to put together that it's replayable even when you know everything the game does. And again, like I felt the need to spend a lot of the time saying, the way this game tells its story is so creative. As a lover of indie horror games and slashers, the idea of an indie horror game with this level of quality where you play as the slasher is just so perfect. And I want to spend the remaining time in this video just gushing over everything else this game gets right. I adore this art style. If you're a frequent viewer of the channel, you know I am a sucker for 2 graphical styles, low poly graphics and pixel art. Everything in the game looks great. The environments are both vibrant and dark and paint a perfect tone and feeling for the experience. The character designs are simple and still distinct and stylized. All of the kills are so gory and over the top, but still look as disturbing as they should in this style. The developer absolutely nailed the visuals. And something that amazes me about this game, and the reason I made the title of this video what it is that this game is very much a horror game, despite you being the technical threat. Even though you are the one putting lives in danger, the danger to you is getting caught doing so. Which, although you are a terrible person, is honestly equally tense because getting caught is earth-shattering. This game is so suspenseful, especially in some of the later levels where you have to be so methodical. It's actually chilling, despite, again, you being the killer. The Happyhills Homicide is creative, fun, action-packed, uncomfortable, and everything I would want it to be. It is such a cool experience and a really fun one to revisit, and that's why I love everything about it. Thank you everyone for watching. I have been the baddest. I'll see you guys later.